I understand why when the government is so corrupt and they lie so much and they screw over average Americans so much, it leads to an environment where conspiracies spread.
Yeah.
And people start, and then the other thing is that there are like a lot of really legitimate conspiracies that really are conspiracies.
Yeah.
Now, you know, I mean, it's pretty clear that there was that. I mean, we have the emails, like we know, like Fauci conspired to kill the lab leak story. Like they conspired to kill the Hunter Biden story.
Yeah.
I mean, these are conspiracies.
Yeah.
And so, you know, again, it's like my, you know, analogy of like, it's like if I heard Sam Harris said recently on a podcast that he said something, he goes, and he was being critical of you and RFK, I think, and Brett Weinstein. And he said, like, he goes, well, these guys are over here talking about how bad the mRNA vaccine is, how bad COVID restrictions are, but I'm trying to sail where I understand that, like, we're losing trust in these institutions, but we also need institutions that we can trust. And my thing is almost, it's like the analogy of if you're cheating on your wife, right, and your wife catches you cheating on her, and then you go, you know, your response is like, you know, the real problem here is that there's not trust in this marriage, and we need a marriage with trust. And it's like, yeah.
No, the real
problem is that you cheated. Yeah, like the problem is that you lied.
Yeah.
That's why there's no trust.
Right.
Like, it's not like, I'm fine with the theoretical argument that like we need institutions we can trust. Like, yeah, that'd be great. That'd be great if during a pandemic there were a bunch of medical experts who could get us accurate information, be honest, and spread that information around. And so, sure. But the problem isn't that we just don't trust them. The problem is that they're lying, and we caught them red-handed. And then that led to a bunch of people going like, well, how long have they been lying? You know, if they're lying about this, when were they honest? And then the more you look into it, you're like, oh, shit, they were always lying. They've been lying for a really long time. And so to turn around and then blame that on the problem here is just that we don't have trust. Like, no, that's actually a solution. That's a step in the right direction if you don't trust these motherfuckers.
COVID cracked a lot of people.
Yeah, it sure did.
It really did. It exposed people that it's very unfortunate.
Trump did a lot too, and then COVID really took it to the next level. But it's, you know, it's interesting. You learn a lot about who people really are, how things really work. You know, how much it's like a stress test. Kind of, you know. I have a bit about this in my new special, by the way, which was just released yesterday on YouTube. Go check it out. Please.
Yeah.
But it's like COVID was like a stress test, you know? Like you throw a crisis at something and you see how strong it really is. What's the Constitution here? Yeah. And it exposed a lot. Yeah. You go, ooh, we had some weaknesses.
Yeah. Exposed a lot in people that they don't want to admit it exposed them because they keep digging themselves deeper and deeper into these holes trying to find ways that they were right. Yeah. And you see a lot of that online. You see a lot of that on Twitter. There's so many people that are just trying to reinforce with their previous statements, regardless of whether or not they're easily disproven now at this point.
Yeah, and the crazy thing is when you encounter people who are still hanging on to the arguments that the regime itself has already abandoned. You know what I mean? Like, they're not even making that argument anymore. Like, Fauci's not even saying this. And then people will say these things. You know, I see people still, it's only a pandemic of the unvaccinated.
They still say that?
And you're like, but just regular people, like online. Like, Fauci ain't saying that anymore. Even he knows, like, we've abandoned that talking point. But then people, you hear it enough, and they believe it. And that's one of the things with all this stuff. It's part of how propaganda works. I guess like the big lie type deal, that if you just repeat something often enough, it does stick with a lot of people.
A lot.
There's a certain percentage who it's just like, yeah, but I heard that a lot, so there must be something to it.
And it's a disturbing amount of smart people that are just unwilling to go outside the boundaries of the ideology. There's a thing that you're supposed to say, and they say it so you don't get attacked. And it just like, everybody's like, yeah, thanks for saying that.
Yes, and then there's also a weird reaction, like, it's like people get into binary thinking a lot. They want to put everything into a neat box. Like I remember I tweeted something about the Sam Harris, like when he had that clip, and it's just the amount of responses I get where people who are agreeing with me, but they'll say things like, they're like, this guy is such an idiot. And you're like, no. He's not. Like, that's kind of the whole interesting thing here. It's like, no, he's not dumb. Like, he's a really brilliant neuroscientist or whatever, neurologist, whatever he is. Like, he ain't dumb. You know what I mean? And like, That's kind of more fascinating, actually.
It is more fascinating.
You know, like wrong and stupid are not synonymous.
Right.
Like they're two very different things. And it's interesting. Michael Malice has that line where he goes, it's much easier to train a smart dog. And so like the idea is almost like sometimes even being very intelligent makes you more susceptible to propaganda. Like it's easier to kind of like train the intelligent.
I think the real problem is ego. The people don't ever want to admit they were wrong.
That's a big part of it.
We were talking about this last night about the importance of not being married to your ideas. Your ideas are not you. They're just ideas. And that you have to recognize when you're holding on to ideas because you have made this connection that you have said this thing and this thing is a part of you. And if you say that this thing is incorrect, then you failed. And you're wrong, and you're not as good as you. So you try to find a way where you were good, and you try to find a way where you can kind of manipulate language and maybe even fucking change the information. Like, let's imagine if the information was different.
Yeah.
Let's imagine if 10% of the people died. Yeah, but they didn't.
Yeah, like if your argument is reduced to like, okay, you made this point and you were right and I made this point and I was wrong. But imagine a situation where your point was wrong.
Right.
And my point was right. How about now?
Yeah, let's not imagine that. Let's look at what actually happened, and you should be apologizing.
Yeah, it's like we could play your imagination game in a few minutes, but first let's just talk about like what really happened and who was right and who was wrong.
And how are you discounting this 40% increase in all-cause mortality, or whatever the fuck it is? Yeah. What is it now? You know, it depends upon the statistics that you read, but it's like they're getting that from insurance companies, right? Where they're trying to make an assessment of like what's going on, and there's a lot of people that are very nervous about this because what is the increase in all-cause mortality right now? I think it's like 18 to 59 or whatever the fuck it is. There's some very bizarre increase.
Yeah.
And I heard Neil deGrasse Tyson trying to say, well, a lot of people were drinking during the pandemic. Like, really? Was there another thing that happened too?
Right.
That may be really crazy. Do you imagine if so many people started drinking, there was a 40% increase in all-cause mortality? Wouldn't there be like shows about alcoholism? Like, ladies and gentlemen, like look at what's happening to our country. There's a 40% imagine there was no pandemic, there's no vaccinations. Imagine all of a sudden a 40% increase in all-cause mortality. And then you just kind of casually say, well, I guess a lot more people are drinking now.
And